I was just sitting down and meditating, and I don't often do that. The only time I ever do really is when I just have this urge to sit down and meditate, which is every so often. And basically I just sit down and start meditating, and I don't really think about it. It's not premeditated meditating. And I was sitting there, and some random images and associations were going through my mind a little bit. And then it subsided and it became really quiet. And I realized in that moment that my attention, or the center of my felt sense of who I am, or who I was at that moment at least, it dropped into my heart. And I've read before that some people actually have the sensation that they reside in their heart. And just in that moment, a few minutes ago, I really felt that. I didn't feel like I was my head. I felt like I was my heart. And maybe I have felt that way for a while and not noticed it, but that was the first time that I really noticed that I felt like I was my heart. And then I was breathing and noticing my breathing, and I was talking in a different video about breathing and how certain types of breathing, especially even amounts of breath in to even amounts of breath out, is coherent breathing, and after a while it produces a coherent heartbeat. And there's an app called Stress Doctor that helps one do this, and there's another app called Complete Coherence, or that's the website. And the Complete Coherence guy, I forget his name, I remember watching a talk, and he talks about how the heartbeat has to be coherent in order for the right sort of electrical nutrition to go from the heart to the brain, because there's actually more neurons going from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart. So more information is actually going from the heart to the brain. And if the heart's beating erratically or stressed, that basically goes along with stressed emotions, which probably means there's a storm of thoughts and feelings going on in the body and the mind that correlate with that stressed heartbeat. So all that information, a lot of it is actually coming from the heart. If the heart was calm, the mind would probably be a lot more calm. But what I was thinking about today when I realized that I was actually residing in my heart was that I was just wondering if it matters as much to breathe coherently, or if the coherent breathing is sort of a way to be mindful and actually calm the heart to be in the heart. And the subtle difference here is, I'm wondering if a person is just in their heart, if the heart is naturally more coherent, instead of having to sit down and coherently breathe. And there's still a ton of value in that. I'm just wondering that if a person naturally was in a state of breathing coherence or heart coherence, then naturally there'd be breathing coherence, there'd be the proper electrical signals and energy going from the heart to the brain naturally. So is it as much to practice breathing coherently, or could it also be helpful to actually have the felt sense that we reside in our hearts more so than our minds? And how to do that, I don't know exactly. Perhaps not having so many thoughts in one's head all the time, one naturally might feel more connected to one's heart. I just feel personally that thoughts in general are very detrimental, whether positive or negative. There's way too much emphasis on thinking and reasoning and logic. So if there's a bad logical thought and you replace it with a good logical thought, it's still logic. And there's a lot more to life beyond that logic. And what is more to life beyond that logic is life itself. And life isn't logical. Life is life. It's like a living energy, vitality, force. So being in one's heart center is like being connected with the vital force, the heartbeat, that electromagnetic energy field that it creates, which is thousands of times stronger than the electromagnetic field of the brain. So that goes along with some of my thoughts around how a lot of mental health troubles are actually problems of the heart. And and to me, I feel like if we're always incoherent, it almost accumulates. So that incoherence, or that breathing pattern that we are with the heartbeat, those two things combined are almost like recorded in the body from moment to moment. So even if we're thinking wonderful thoughts and going along, if there's some kind of underlying stress and the breathing stress as well, or one's not breathing very well, it's still causing accumulated stress in the body, which can at some point cause some kind of overload. And an overload example might be something like going into a psychosis, which if there's a bunch of stuff underneath the surface that one's not dealing with, but one is going on about one's business on the superficial level, eventually the stuff brewing underneath the surface can catch up with somebody, or can be sort of jolted into something worse than it is. Or Dr. Daniel Siegel talks about the term allostatic load, which just means one's sort of accumulated stress that's built up. So this incoherence can actually possibly be recorded and accumulated as an allostatic load. So even if one's able to go through the day and get through the day, but they're always extremely stressed, that would be like increasing that allostatic load and then making a person more susceptible to some kind of breakdown, which is basically all those images and thoughts and feelings accumulated eventually can't be ignored anymore. And it becomes to the point where it's actually crippling, because those images and that world of those images and thoughts and feelings takes over one's life. And the heart has the language of symbols and images and feelings. It doesn't have so many words. It can create words too, but they're not necessarily going to be logical. They're not going to be rational. They're not going to be related to maybe what's going on in the moment, because it's the accumulated garbage from the past, and not only one's personal past, but even the collective, because I feel that we actually kind of share the same heart. And I got my heart from my mom, and she got her heart from her mom and her dad, like together. And you go on and you go on and you go on until you've gone many generations. Well, that's all encoded in the heart. And even when somebody has a heart transplant, sometimes they have the memories of the person they got the heart from. Well, that could go even just through the genetics and the lineage of a person from generation to generation. How can it's logical that it could be encoded in the DNA that encodes for the heart. And so those subtle images and that subtle past information can actually still maybe come up, because maybe a person in their past, in the past history of the family, didn't get to resolve certain things, and maybe they are passed to the next person to kind of look at those things and resolve those things in the family lineage. And this is just all pretend. I'm just making this stuff up just for fun, and I'm sort of making it up as I go. But that dimension, that collective heart, whether it's personal, collective, familial, it's all there, and it's all piling up for somebody to deal with. And if it's not me, it's going to be somebody else in my family, um, or somebody somewhere else in the world who doesn't even know me. They might have to deal with something that's related to me, because we all share that one heart. And so by being in one's heart and being coherent, it's actually creating more coherence in the entire reality, because we are connected, we're not separate. So it's possible that a person can actually heal a lot of that stuff just by being connected to one's own physiology, instead of so connected to the abstractness of the thoughts and the words and the images that the brain cells, they create those images, but those images aren't the brain cells. They're not the physiology. The physiology is like the oxygen. It's your posture, it's your breathing, it's your heartbeat, it's electricity, it's all of that. And so we need to pay attention to that aspect as well. And that's kind of my thoughts on some of that. There was probably more to it, but it just felt really interesting to be connected to my heart like that, and I'm almost wondering if that'll continue to be how I feel when I'm actually going about my daily life. And I think it could be good if I do feel that way. And I think there's a subtle difference between being in one's mind all day long, thinking, and then sitting down for 10 minutes and doing one's coherent breathing practice, which has value, versus taking some of the energy and power away from the thinking process and actually being more connected to one's heart. And that was another thought I had. It was about how a person that goes into mania, like I've experienced, a lot of that experience feels very beautiful. It feels everything's beautiful and very, there's so many different characteristics, but the main one I'm thinking of right now is beauty. And then the opposite of mania, which is psychosis, is actually, it's all ugly. It's all terrible and scary and terrifying. So it's terrifying, whereas the beautiful mania part was it felt very much like love. And it feels like to me that beauty is trying to burst forth through some of us. But then when we get pulled back from being sort of beyond the boundaries of what consensus reality feels is normal in terms of good feeling, and we snap back, we have to go through the bad feeling aspect of some of this, and through the beauty might be more real, because it's like it's actually feeling like it's happening in reality, whereas the ugly is all these images and thoughts that aren't really there. And then we have like these hallucinations. So we go from being this experience of real feeling beauty to this terrifying, ugly thought image dimension. And to me, that's just the collective ugliness of all the stuff people think all day long and have thought all day long for the past 10,000 years. And it's not really real. And that's why I feel like we shouldn't really feed it more energy anymore, because it's scary. It's difficult to go beyond it, but with so many people feeding that beast, because that's a collective domain we also all share.